All right, let's see if the transmission goes well. Things were looking skatey there for a second. All right, this is Mahadev the Thunder Wizard. We are going to continue our reading of my book, Mounting Sleipnir, Indo-European Roots of Germanic Polytheism. And today we're going to be talking about Loki. So at least that's the chapter we're going to start off with. I'm sure we'll move into another chapter, but Loki is really important. I think Loki is really important to understand a lot of things. First off, just to understand how the gods work. You know, what polytheism is as opposed to dualism or monotheism. Basically, monotheism, you know, Abrahamic monotheism is really dualism. Even though, you know, if you talk to a Christian or a Jew or a Muslim, you know, they'll tell you there's only one God and that one God is all powerful. But especially in the Christian tradition, no matter what they say, the truth is that they believe that there are two gods. They believe in a God of light and a God of darkness. They'll tell you that they believe that God the Father is all powerful. But, you know, those are just words, because the reality is they are deathly afraid of Satan. And they believe that Satan is running around deceiving people, has the power to deceive people out of their spirituality. He has the power to take people, you know, take them down into hell. And, you know, somebody just left a comment on my channel. I mean, if you're familiar with Christianity, this would not be, you know, anything weird for you. Sorry, hang on one second. I got stuff on my computer here. But I guess I'll just go ahead and read this because it's, you know, it just showed up on my channel just a few minutes ago, in all honesty. But it lets you know that all monotheism starts with the understanding that there isn't really one God, there's two. So let's see if we can find that. Here it is. Somebody who calls themselves Hope, ironically, says, and you know, all this person did, I mean, it just gives you an idea of the thought process. They didn't actually go and watch, you know, one of my videos where I talk about something. It's just the welcome video to my channel, which just says Thunder Wizard channel, you know, whatever, esoteric spirituality without all the nonsense, and then I do this and I do that on the channel. It's nothing. I don't go into depth about anything, but just that was enough. Just the name, Thunder Wizard. This person says, all those witchcraft or wizard stuffs are of the devil. You're inviting demonic spirits into your life if you practice it. This will lead you to hell. Repent and ask God to forgive all your sins. Jesus Christ is the only way to heaven. He loves you and died for you and raised to life again on the third days. Even death cannot defeat him. Only true peace and happiness can be found in Jesus. Jesus is the head of all principality and power and authority. He is above all. Jesus is the King of kings and Lord of lords, the one true living God, the creator of all things. Repent from your sins and turn to God before it is too late. And then in parentheses, I know some of you will hate this message because I'm bringing light to others. It is the evil spirits in you that hates it. Only Jesus can deliver you from this evil spirits and from the power of darkness. So you see, I mean, even in that, he's, you know, and he repeats himself over and over again, basically saying that Jesus is the only way, that God is all powerful. You know, if you really are comfortable in that, how many times do you have to say it? If you keep repeating yourself in the same sentence, it shows an unconscious doubt. And why did this person have to go onto my channel? I mean, why can't he go onto a Christian channel and leave that comment? Why does he have to seek out a channel, as he says, I know some of you will hate this message? Who does that? somebody who's insecure, somebody who actually unconsciously believes what I believe. And because they unconsciously believe what I believe and they can't tolerate that thought, they have to seek out those people that reflect what they actually believe, and they have to try and put it down. As I've said somewhere in one of my books, and I've shared it on my videos numerous times. When I was a Christian, I would hear people say, even pastors from the pulpit, but other Christians, whatever, would often say something to this effect: "Our God is a good God. And I know that I know that I know deep inside of myself that our God is a good God and He is the only God." Nobody talks like that. The only people who talk like that are Christians and other monotheists. Polytheists, you never hear them do that. You never hear a polytheist say, "I know that I know that I know that Shiva is the one true God. I know He is a good God. I know it." You don't hear him do that. You don't hear him go off about any of the other gods. Maybe Krishna a little bit. You hear some Krishna followers to a little bit kind of do that. But it shows that they're really insecure with their belief. And this plays out with the fact that there's a devil. And that this devil, even though he's supposedly less powerful than God, he is treated as though he is equal with God. And you have to be vigilant. You have to watch out. God can't protect you for some reason. He's not able to protect you. And, you're not smart enough to know what's good for you, so you can't make decisions for yourself. Anyway, what does this have to do with Loki? Well, because Loki is seen this way. Now, to be fair, Loki has been seen this way for a long time. It's not like our ancestors didn't see Loki similar to this. But, one of the traits, one of the things that Loki accomplishes is exactly that. He brings up your insecurity. But Loki is not, Loki is not the person that's going around stealing people's souls. Loki is responsible for all of the powers and the gifts that the gods have. Loki's mischief is what brings it about. And so if you don't understand Loki, it's hard to understand polytheism. I've seen in neo-heathenism, I haven't talked to neo-heathens in years, but I'm quite sure it's still very similar. But a lot of the, quote, conservative, especially when you get into like the quote, folkish. By the way, the word folkish comes from Nazism. First person who ever called Nordic polytheism folkish were the Nazis. And they had a plan. They were going to mandate their folkish religion onto people. So anybody who walks around calling themselves folkish, if they don't realize it, they are using the terminology of hardcore racism. But you'll find in like folkish neo-heathenism and other conservative, especially the racialist, they won't even allow you to speak the name of Loki. Because if you do, it's, and this comes from people who are born in Christian societies. Whether they were Christian as, growing up or not, I don't know. But they're definitely influenced by it to such a degree that they can't see Loki in any other way as being the devil. And you have to watch out for it. So we need to understand that in polytheism, there is no such thing as an all-powerful devil. In polytheism, you are responsible. It's not that there aren't negative entities around. Trolls and, for lack of a better word, demons, and or spirits that just don't simply follow, human morality, which you got to be careful of because you don't know what they're going to do. They don't really care a whole hell of a lot about you. But there isn't some all-powerful evil being out there that's doing all these horrible things to you. Even Surt, which I'm sure I'll talk about in here, Surt is not a devil. He is just simply the force of entropy, which has to happen. Things are created and things fall apart and then they're recreated. So there's no devil out there trying to destroy God's plan or destroy the righteous. In polytheism, you are responsible. Any negativity that is in your life, you are responsible for. And you are, if there are, as I teach, if negative things happen to you in life, it's your creation. So I talk about all that stuff in other videos. So we'll just get on with the reading here. So, we'll have question and answers after us, but let's go ahead and get started. Let me just go make sure I'm still on here. All right. So let's go ahead and get started. And we're going to start with the chapter called Loki. Loki is an extremely interesting deity who is unique to Teutonic polytheism. While most religions have some form of trickster god similar to Loki, I find Loki as portrayed in Teutonic mythology to be a very unique and complex character. Loki is undoubtedly the trickster. This is the first impression one clearly gets of him. However, if someone merely goes by first impressions and simply classifies Loki as the impish troublemaker, they will miss most of what Loki accomplishes, and I believe this is by design. Loki is actually very humble, and I believe he likes to distract people with his trickster visage in order to allow him the secrecy to accomplish his greatest works behind the scenes where no one can see him. In fact, we, the readers of Teutonic myths, are often given privileged information about who Loki really is and what he accomplishes, while most of the gods are fooled into seeing Loki as merely the devious clown. But being the trickster that he is, no one should take Loki at face value, especially his external mask as the troublemaker. In fact, trying to classify Loki at all is very difficult. He is directly responsible for acquiring all of the magical items possessed by all of the other gods. Notable examples are Thunor's hammer, Freyja's flaming gem, Brisingamen, and Woden's magical horse, Slipper or Sleipnir. All are directly attributable to Loki. In fact, were it not for Loki and the magical items he acquires for them, the gods would not be able to accomplish their celestial work at all. A notable example of how Christianity has influenced modern society is how the god Loki is viewed by most modern people. He is often viewed as the Norse pre-Christian version of the devil. The Norse myths are very clear that Loki is directly responsible for the magical items possessed by the gods, but because he is also portrayed at first glance as the trickster who is at odds with some of the gods, the knee-jerk reaction for many people who have been raised in a Judeo-Christian society is to simply equate Loki with evil. I was once told a funny story about how Loki was perceived by a certain Asatru kindred. This kindred had a policy that nobody was allowed to speak Loki's name out loud for fear that it would bring bad luck. During one kindred gathering, a group of people were standing in a circle in a local park. One of the participants said, "Oh, the hell with it, I'm going to say his name," and then he shouted, "Loki!" Immediately from behind the bushes emerged a skunk who ran into the center of the circle and sprayed everyone and then ran back into the bushes. This experience sounded extremely funny. I saw it as Loki playing a prank on some Asatruers who took themselves and their theology a little too seriously. In my opinion, Loki's message was designed to either open one's mind to other possibilities or to confirm their limited Christianized bias of him. In the first case, it was, "Hey guys, lighten up and have some fun. Your ignorance smells bad." Or for those who are attached to their dualistic Christianized version, "Yes, you are absolutely right. I am evil. Aha, I spray you. Fear me with my stinky tail." Based on the version of the story I heard for that Asatru kindred, this incident was merely proof that Loki was very dangerous and evil, and therefore his name should never be spoken out loud. I think this is an extreme interpretation. If Loki were evil, he could have done far worse. Now, if a rattlesnake had come out of the bushes and bit someone's infant, then maybe Loki could be seen as an evil force. But a skunk? Other than unpleasant odor and some bruised egos, there was no permanent harm done, and it was actually quite funny. As is typical with Loki, how one views his antics depends on their unconscious emotional agendas. For me, as someone who sees Loki as a god of unconventional wisdom, the skunk is a hilarious joke with a powerful lesson for those who are able to see it. For someone who has an emotional agenda to portray Loki as an evil demon, then they too have ample reason to see him according to their own bias on how the scenario is played out. In my experience, how one reacts to Loki is a very good indicator of emotional and intellectual maturity. For those who fear personal evolution, they will fear Loki. Those who seek consciousness-changing challenges will see Loki as a liberator. And Loki likes it that way and is willing to adopt whatever form in which you choose to see him. His machinations are brilliant. This isn't to say that I do not have great respect for him. I myself do not seek Loki's help or advice lightly. In my experience, I know that Loki will seek to help me in whatever way will most efficiently result in my evolution. So I know that Loki's help always comes with a price. I know that Loki's touch will mean the death of some emotional attachment. Therefore, I only seek him out when I know that he is the only one who can do the job. If Loki has one friend in the cosmos, it would be Thunor. Among all the gods, Thunor is equated with the idea of spiritual purity. Thunor is evoked at the beginning of all rituals to sanctify and protect the sacred space. Thunor is well known for his truthfulness, bravery, and eagerness to destroy all destructive giants and trolls. Yet the Thunderer is a frequent companion of Loki. How can this be if Loki is pure evil? When Thunor's hammer is stolen, the first person the Thunder God runs to for help is Loki, who does in fact help him retrieve his stolen Thunder Hammer from the giant world. If Loki was an evil or disreputable character, you can be sure that Thunor would at the very least shun him or very likely try to kill him. Thunor does neither. This is a very important clue to the character of Loki. This association between Loki and Thunor is very interesting, and having contemplated this unusual relationship, I have come to some very interesting conclusions concerning their relationship. For a while, I did not completely understand why these two gods would choose to be companions until I began to look at the etymology of Loki's name and its relationship to Thunor's power of lightning. Loki's name is thought to be derived from the Indo-European root luk, which has multiple meanings. Among them is lock, luck, light, spark, and lightning. The last three names listed are interesting and seem to show a definite connection to Thunor. My favorite definition of Loki from this investigation would be lightning spark. Looking at this connection, Loki's name seems to indicate that Loki has characteristics similar to the spark of wildfire that is created from a lightning strike. This definition reveals why Loki and Thunor are seen together so often. When a wildfire erupts from a lightning strike, the lightning bolt itself is not seeking to start a fire. It is merely seeking to equalize the electromagnetic forces between the clouds and the earth. However, if any combustible materials happen to be near the location of the lightning strikes, such as a tree that serves as the conduit for the lightning, then there is the possibility for wildfire. Once that wildfire is born from the lightning and the tree, it takes on its own life and personality apart from the lightning that spawned it. So Loki and Thunor are inextricably connected. Wildfire can be both restorative and destructive. If the soil and plants near lightning strike contain lots of moisture, then there is little danger of a resulting wildfire. If, however, there is a lack of moisture and/or excessive decaying plant material, such as excessive undergrowth or dying or diseased trees, then a wildfire is more likely to be started from a thunderbolt. So while the force of Loki can be destructive and unpredictable, wildfire only occurs when there is excess and decay. After such wildfires have burned through the forest, the resulting ash serves as nutrient-rich fertilizer for new plant growth. In such ways, the forest is regenerated and kept healthy. Loki need not be feared by anyone unless there is excess or decay for him to consume with his fiery nature. These are the conditions that attract Loki. For us humans, we need not fear Loki unless we have psychological, spiritual, or emotional decay. That is when Loki is most likely to be attracted to cause mischief or initiate his fiery ego cleansing in our lives. One way to avoid such internal decay is through diligent self-honesty and thorough spiritual discipline. While Loki is most often seen by both gods and men as being an unpredictable joker with little respect for others, I have found the opposite to be true. In my opinion, Loki is perhaps the most devoted to the evolution of men and gods. It is Loki's love and fierce commitment to the evolutionary empowerment of the cosmos that allows him the bravery and objectivity necessary to make the difficult choices to destroy the cosmos by starting the fires of Ragnarok. From the myths and from my personal experience with Loki, his persona is irreverent, selfish, opportunistic, and uncaring for the welfare of others, but that is merely a mask he wears to enable him to act in secret. Loki actually does the most selfless and caring work for the cosmos and does not seek any recognition for it. In fact, he seeks to deny any credit by hiding behind the mask of the trickster. In my opinion, the true nature of Loki's character is found in the Lokasena, or Loki's argument. The myth's title is often translated as Loki's flighting. I did not know what that word meant, so I looked it up. Flighting is defined as a ritual poetic exchange of insults practiced mainly between the 5th and 16th centuries. So this type of ritualized quarreling has more substance than the typical modern verbal clash that one might expect from your average drunken bar fight. Flighting has a spiritual purpose, and those who were in attendance for the flighting in this myth would have understood that this was a well thought out ritualistic sparring with spiritual consequences. Therefore, I do not believe the gods took this flighting lightly. The fact that as a result of this verbal sparring, Loki ends up chained under the earth until Ragnarok is testament that this argument had very serious consequences. It is for this reason that I believe Loki had planned his flighting well in advance with full knowledge of the eventual outcome. Let's set the stage for the Lokasena. The gods were in attendance at a great mead fest held in their honor by the god Gymer. In Gymer's hall, the mead endlessly poured itself. In place of fire, the hall was illuminated by shining gold. This was a very posh event in stark contrast to the Spartan warrior values normally associated with Teutonic deities. This is important. As we shall see, this flagrant excess and the self-aggrandizement that usually accompanies such events offends the normally carefree, fun-loving Loki. It angers him so much that he commits murder. The guests, the gods, praised much the ability that Aegir's serving men, The guests praised much the ability of Aegir's serving men. Loki might not endure that, and he slew Fimafeng, whose name means quick server. Then the gods shook their shields and howled at Loki and drove him away to the forest, and then after set to drinking again. At first glance, if one carries the assumption that Loki was evil, one might believe the gods were justifiably angry at Loki for the murder of an innocent servant. Yet as soon as they had driven Loki away with some minimal shouting and banging of shields, they went right back to drinking the endless self-pouring mead as though nothing had happened. If the gods were really righteously indignant over the slaying of an innocent, they would have immediately halted their drinking and relentlessly hunted Loki down and captured him. Apparently, the only thing that momentarily angered the gods was the inconvenience they might suffer by the sudden removal of the quick service of their waiter. They seem to have had no thoughts about the crime of murdering an innocent person. Why did Loki kill the efficient servant? If Loki was the greedy, selfish hedonist that he is often accused of being, then he would be the first to dive in and indulge in the feasting and drinking. Notice that the servant's name means quick server. Why would Loki be offended at someone who was good at their job, especially if that servant were available to him to quickly serve the normally lusty Loki with ample free food and drink? I think that Loki was offended that the gods were being lulled into a state of complacency. The gold-filled hall and the endless self-pouring mead apparently created an atmosphere of overindulgence and excess that perhaps made the gods complacent in Loki's eyes. In the traditional tribal Teutonic mindset, complacency resulted in opportunity for enemy tribes to attack. Loki was angered that his fellow gods were creating a vulnerability that could be exploited, possibly by an antagonistic force such as the thirst giants who indulge in mindless destruction. In my opinion, this myth is a prophetic one. In ancient times before the Romans, people in Europe had to live in harmony with their immediate resources. If someone had food, shelter, clothing, wood, etc., they would have been considered wealthy. The pre-Roman Teutonic tribes lived very simply. According to the description given by Caesar and Tacitus, the Germanic tribes were in a transitional state between hunter-gatherers and agrarian warriors. Whenever I walk into a grocery store and see an enormous building filled with every possible imaginable type of food, readily available, processed and packaged, ready to eat, I imagine how one of my Bronze Age ancestors would have reacted to see all that food in one place. Say whatever you want about the sad state of the economy. We are filthy rich in comparison to our ancestors who lived just 100 years ago. The only difference is that we have become accustomed to having everything we want at our fingertips. We have become accustomed to the endless free-flowing mead that serves itself. There is nothing at all wrong with enjoying abundance, but it is not respecting the abundant gifts of nature that is offensive to Loki. And in my opinion, it is the very reason that Loki begins planning Ragnarok. Not to punish humans, but because we have become so complacent and disrespectful of Mother Nature's abundant gifts that Loki sees excess and decay that needs to be burnt away. Once again, I digress. So, back to the story. The only god not in attendance at the feast was Thunor. Thunor has a balancing, calming effect on Loki, while Loki has an amplifying effect on Thunor. If Thunor were in attendance in the beginning of the feast, Loki would have been influenced by Thunor's presence to be more lenient on the gods. Loki must have known this and planned his flighting as a result of Thunor's absence. It is also interesting to note that Thunor was not in attendance because he was, quote, on a journey in the east, unquote, which may possibly mean that Thunor was away fighting thirst giants in Jotunheim. This attests to Thunor's character. While he loves mead, it is not for mere pleasure that Thunor drinks large amounts of the honey liquor. Like the Vedic Indra, who drinks the intoxicating soma juice in order to fight the world serpent Vritra, Thunor only drinks mead to empower himself to create thunder and fight the destruction of the giants who threaten Middle-earth, the home of human beings. So the fact that Thunor is not in attendance here indicates that in Thunor's opinion, this mead fest was a trivial affair. It is also interesting to note that the gods found it acceptable to have a mead feast while Thunor was away, possibly fighting their foes, the giants. This myth exemplifies my previous assertion that, in my opinion, how one reacts to Loki indicates their level of spiritual maturity. From this myth, it would be very easy for one to make a superficial judgment about Loki being an insecure malcontent. But when we look at where Loki ends up at the end of this myth, we can see Loki's selfless commitment to human evolution. After ruthlessly revealing the personal failings of each of the gods, Loki is chased and captured, whereupon he is imprisoned in the underworld of Hel and bound to a sharp rock by the entrails of his own son. A serpent is hung above him and drips venom onto his skin, which burns Loki. Loki's consort holds a bowl above him to catch the venom, but every time she goes to empty the bowl, a drop of venom lands on Loki, and he writhes in pain, which causes earthquakes. Again, at first glance, it would be easy to cavalierly sneer at Loki and say, well, he got what he deserved. But bear in mind, every one of Loki's accusations in the mead hall are 100% accurate. Loki is given multiple chances to stop his criticisms, yet he continued. He knowingly taunted and provoked the gods until they could no longer control themselves, and they bound him in hell. So either Loki was very stupid and did not know when to quit, or he planned the whole affair, including its eventual outcome. It seems unlikely to me that the crafty Loki would be so stupid not to know when to shut up and save his own skin. But to further support my argument, let's examine the nature and purpose of earthquakes. Earthquakes are the result of the tectonic plates in the Earth's crust releasing built-up stress. While they can be devastating to us if we are near the epicenter, earthquakes are essential for the health of the planet. Tectonic plates are constantly moving. As they collide with one another, the movement does not stop, and the resulting stress in the Earth's crust can build to unbelievable levels. Imagine what would eventually happen if that stress was not regularly relieved. So earthquakes are essential for the health of the planet. Since Loki operates on a psychological level, the message is clear. Loki's main purpose is to relieve unresolved psychological stress which threatens to destroy us. When we take ourselves too seriously, Loki is there to entertain us with his humorous antics, which always have a purpose and contain deep lessons if we examine them. Like the gods in the Lokasena, if we become complacent to such a degree that we leave ourselves vulnerable to spiritual decay, Loki will ruthlessly reveal our personal failings that are threatening to destroy us from within. Unlike some of the other gods who crave adoration, Loki is not interested in whether or not we love him or despise him. He does not care what we think of him. He is only concerned with our ultimate welfare. As such, he employs whatever means necessary in order to accomplish his goal, which is the spiritual evolution of the entire cosmos. In terms of Loki's character and his connection to spiritual evolution, it is also important to note that according to the Lokasena, Loki is the only god that has taken a blood oath with Woden. Loki quotes, "I have not forgotten, Odin, that in the foretime that we two took a blood oath together. You promised me that you would not pour mead unless you drank it with me." Unquote. Since Woden is undoubtedly the god of spiritual and shamanic awareness, such a close connection to Loki clearly points to Loki's strong connection to spiritual evolution. If Loki were a despicable, evil coward, Woden would surely have no close association with him. This line in the Lokasena has led some scholars to deduce that Loki is merely the shadow side of Odin. I could go on and write an entire book on Loki, so for the purposes of this book, I will pause here now on the subject of Loki. So, now I move on in the book to other things, but before I continue, let's talk about the other favorite myth of mine that perhaps it might be my most favorite myth of all, which is the myth of how Balder ends up being going to the underworld, going to hell. And if you're not familiar with it, I'm sure you are, but there is Balder. Balder is the favorite of all of the gods in Asgard. Everybody loves being around Balder. Balder is, he's the shining sun. He shines with this beautiful spiritual light. Everybody around him is happy. They love being near him. And because he is so beloved, his mother, Frigga, which means beloved, Frigga gives him the gift of invincibility. And so she went around to all of the beings in the cosmos. I think about it, it makes me want to cry every time I talk about it. But she went to all of the beings in the cosmos, which means everything, every single rock, every single plant, every single animal, all of the gods, the stars, the gases, every single molecule in the universe. She went to everything and said, and had them promise that they would never cause harm to Balder, except for the one being which was the what's that plant? Why am I forgetting the name of that plant? Anyway, you know what I'm talking about. The sacred plant that the Druids use. For some reason, I'm forgetting. So she goes to that plant, and she doesn't ask that plant to protect Balder, because she says it's not old enough. It doesn't have the responsibility, doesn't have enough maturity to be able to make a vow. Mistletoe, thank you, mistletoe. So she asks every single being in the universe except for mistletoe to make sure that Balder is never harmed. So, once again, in the hall of the gods, and I don't think Thor was there either at that time. It wasn't mentioned. I don't remember reading Thor being in this myth, but in any case, All of the gods are there in Asgard, and they're drinking mead, and they're partying, and they are using Balder as entertainment. And they are throwing things at him. They're throwing knives and axes and arrows and spears and fireballs and everything. And they're enjoying it because, you know, things like he's just standing there like Superman. By the way, he is like Superman. He's standing there like Superman, and everything is just exploding off of his chest. You know, either missing him or bypassing him or exploding off of him. And this is just absolute fun, and they're getting drunk and they're, you know, doing it. Loki sees this and he becomes infuriated. And so he goes to Balder's cousin, whose name, is it his cousin or his brother? Goes to his cousin, who is named Ignorance. And he's blind. And so he goes to Ignorance, blind Ignorance, and he says, hey, how come you're not joining in the fun? Why aren't you, you know, throwing things at Balder? And he says, oh, I can't see, so I can't aim my arrow. And Loki says, oh, no problem, I'll aim it for you. And so sure enough, he gets him and he lines him up and, you know, helps him pull back the bow, and he puts a sprig of mistletoe, gink, right there on the blade of the arrow, the point of the arrow. And then says, okay, yep, there it is, let go. And so Ignorance releases the arrow, goes into Balder and kills him. And then Balder is taken to the underworld. And then Frigga, everybody's devastated by this. And Frigga goes to Hela, who now has Balder, and asks for Balder, you know, for her to release Balder. And Hela says, I can't do that. I would love to help you out, but I can't do it. You know, once he's here, he's here. And I, you know, I have to follow the rules. She says, but if you can get every single being in the universe to weep for Balder, I'll let him go. And so Frigga goes, no problem. She goes out and she does her thing again, and she goes to every single being in the universe, every single molecule of the entire cosmos, and gets everything and everybody to weep for Balder except for one giantess whose name means gratitude. And gratitude will not weep for Balder. And then there's an editorial note in the myth that says, and we think this is Loki. But the names, it doesn't matter if it's Loki or not. The name tells everything. It means that Loki appreciated Balder. There was never a moment where Loki did not appreciate everything that Balder gave. So there's no need for him to weep. You only weep because of something that you miss. You miss it. You're weeping for yourself. And Loki says, I'm not going to weep because I appreciated it. I appreciated every moment I had with him. You don't appreciate him. And that's the lesson. It was a lesson that Loki gave the whole world that basically says appreciate the soul, which is all what life is all about. If you do not live for your soul and appreciate your soul, you will have misery. Not living to your soul, which for me is living for your selfish happiness. If you know, I live my entire life based 100% on what makes me happy, not what distracts me from my pain. That's different. People say, well, what if somebody's sole desire is to put cocaine in your neck? What if your sole desire is to blank little children? Those obviously aren't soul desires. Those are people running away from their pain. That's at best it's entertainment, and at worst it's just downright horrific because their pain is so bad they have to take it out on the rest of the world. Your joy is what gives you joy. And when you live in joy, you will help others. Even if they're jealous of you, even if they're threatened by your existence, they still end up being benefited by it. And so Loki's lesson was that if you live from the soul and you appreciate every second you have being connected to your soul, you'll never weep. over it. All right, so that I didn't put that in the book because I was writing a book and I didn't want to spend all that time, but I thought I'd talk about that. So this is a question and answer. So I'm happy to take questions. I know that people love to give comments, and this is a, what do you call that? This is usually a discussion, but I prefer to have questions. So I don't see any questions. So let's go ahead and move on. And coincidentally enough, I move on to another being that's closely associated with the lower self, which are the dwarves. In case you're not familiar, what I teach, which is I found in multiple traditions, is that we are not made up of one self. We are a community of 3 selves. If we really want to get technical about it, we're a community of many selves because each one of the organs has its own soul and its own identity. But we are made up of higher self, which is here to give us guidance, and a lower self, which is our subconscious and our unconscious mind, our human emotions, our drives, our ego, our identity. And then we have the soul, which is beyond all of that, which is here to experience and witness all of these things. And when all of these 3 selves are in union, communicating with each other, then we achieve enlightenment, however you want to look at that. Okay, there's a question here, so I'll go ahead and answer that before I continue with dwarves. Stormageddon, Dark Lord of All, question: what is the best way to work with Loki when going through a transition period in life? Being ruthlessly honest with yourself. And if you want to interact with Loki, which, I'm not going to say I recommend it or don't recommend it. If you choose to work with Loki, then you've got to go completely naked to him. You got to be completely without any artifice, any mask. You've got to be completely open. So you don't bring all of the worship that you bring all the gods, and you don't act like you're his equal and his bro. You go there saying, hey, I'm well aware that I'm an unconscious individual and I've got a lot of faults. I'm doing my best to be honest with all of them, but I'm telling you that I know that I have issues that I'm not aware of. Please don't step on me. I'm doing my best to be humble with you. Here's my problem. Here's my pain. Here are my issues. And just like treat him like your best friend that you trust, and just get brutally honest. The reason why I say, be careful is because Loki, like me, there's a lot of Loki in me. When you ask questions, I'm ruthless with you. And even if you make a statement, which is why it's never a good idea to just come on here and drop a statement, because I'm going to react to your hubris in trying to drop a statement. And you've seen how angry I get. One person not too long ago was on here, well-meaning, I feel for the guy, well-meaning, wanting to be supportive, who had not read the book and wanted to come in and chime in with his, interpretation of some of the linguistic research that I'd done. And had he just sat and listened, I would have explained it. But no, he had to jump in there trying to be, hey, I'm part of it. And I said, no, you're wrong. And then he said, no, I can give you my sources. And it's like, and I blew up. That's Loki right there. Loki can't tolerate that kind of hubris. He can't tolerate it. He's going to bring it out and he's going to shove it back in your face. So this is why I tell people to ask questions. So maybe to answer your question, maybe the best way to work with Loki, and again, the thought of it is frightening to me, ask a question. What is the best way for me to evolve? What is the best way for me to become conscious? I realize I'm unconscious. I realize that, I often create my own misery. I know that I've got it within me, and Loki, I'm not coming here for anything other than asking for your advice. That's what I would do. But again, if you choose to work with him. The other thing to do is just to accept that he's there, accept that he is going to ruthlessly stimulate and bring out your unresolved issues, but he's only going to stimulate the stuff that is, necessary for your empowerment and for your evolution. So it's enough just to know that he's there doing his job and just say thank you, and then just try to be ruthlessly honest with yourself. Okay, that's my suggestion. Jay, question: is Balder really thankful for Loki's deed? That's an interesting question. It's interesting that you would ask that. It never even dawned on me. Is Balder thankful for Loki's deed? I'm going to have to say he is, because, Balder himself was guilty. He had pride that he was standing there like Superman, not appreciating the gift he had been given of invincibility, and not appreciating his role as what he really is there. He's not there to entertain the gods with his invincibility. He's there to bless them with the power of the soul, to just be his happy, joyous self. So I didn't really think about it, but if I were to hazard a guess, I would say that it's not so much that he's thankful for what Loki did as he is aware also, because he's in, bear in mind, he's in the underworld, and nobody gets into the underworld unless they die from anything other than battle. So just because he was killed by an arrow, according to that, the Norse Germanic understanding is those who die in battle go to Valhalla. Those who die of illness and old age go to the underworld. So what is associated with that? He obviously didn't die in battle. He didn't die a noble death. So that means he died as a result of his pride, his ego. So that must have been seen by the universe as along the lines of illness and old age, something not to be looked upon, with pride. So he would have said, "No, I got myself here. This is my doing. I did this. This was my pride. This was my selfishness." Because had he been in his integrity, instead of wanting to get everybody's approval by standing there being, everybody's laughing and he's like, he must have been enjoying it on a personal level. Instead of that, he would have said, hey guys, this isn't right. My mother gave me this power because she loves me. I'm not going to abuse it. Let's just have a good time. And he would have given them happiness and joy instead of that kind of superficial, ego-driven entertainment. So I don't think it was a question of whether or not he appreciated it. He saw it, it was a testament against him, and he went to the underworld for it. Nobody goes to the underworld unless, there's something unresolved. So what's assumed in that, those who die in battle go to Valhalla. Those who die from old age, illness would contain within it spiritual immaturity, psychological immaturity, things like that. I think that's wrapped up in it. And as you know, as I teach, I believe that illness itself is directly resulting from people's lack of connection to their own soul. So this is a story about illness, not, thinking that you're, like a lot of young people do. In fact, this is really good. Let's talk about this for a second. Here's how illness works. We're not talking about, getting COVID or something like that. I mean, there are other reasons for that. We're talking about the kinds of illnesses of old age, arthritis, heart disease, losing your whatever those diseases are where you lose your ability to talk and remember people's names and stuff like that. Like my mother, why do I keep forgetting that name? Isn't that ironic? The name of that, when you get old and you can't remember stuff anymore. Senility. There's a few names for it. My mom went senile. And so for the last few years of her life, she couldn't remember anything for more than 10 seconds. So if I were talking to her on the phone, she would be, hey, how's your, whatever it was. if I was dating somebody, how's your girlfriend, or how's your business, or where do you live now? And she would ask that. And so I would tell her that, and that would take about 10 or 15 seconds. And then she'd go, so where are you living? And how's your girlfriend? I mean, the same question. She'd repeat this, after about her repeating the same questions 3 times, I would finally say, okay, Mom, I love you, I gotta go. And I'd hang up. And so we could sit here and mourn how sad it was for my mom that she lost her, her memory and wasn't able to keep a coherent, dementia is another word for it, Alzheimer's. Even though that we could say how sad it is that she had Alzheimer's and she had dementia and all that kind of crap. The truth is that I can remember as a little kid my mom choosing to not know things. And I can remember all 3 of us kids looking at her when she would, whatever was going on, and we would tell her, you said this last week, and she'd go, oh, I never said that. We'd say, yes, you did. We were all here when you said it. No, I never did that. She was already working the denial into her life. When you live like that, when you live, forcing denial on yourself, what's going to happen? When you get old, you're going to get dementia. You can't remember people's names. You don't remember anything that happened. So this is what disease is. These kinds of diseases are, after repeatedly denying and pushing down and suppressing and walking away and, not dealing with your soul, the conflict that you have between your human self and your spiritual self, which is the conflict between wanting other people's approval and wanting to fulfill your own desires, which is the conflict of, my therapist would say, individuation. And if somebody is individuated, it means that they're comfortable within themselves. They also have empathy for others, and yet they don't take responsibility for other people's feelings, positive or negative. They have their own individuated reality, which is a really fancy way of saying they live from their souls. If you don't live from your soul, whatever it is that you're pushing away starts to build up in your body over decades. And by the time you're an old person, then you have this, that, or the other thing. So that goes into, old age and illness. So I think Balder is representing that this is what happens when you don't appreciate the soul. You're going to end up in the underworld. And it's not necessarily a bad thing. It just means, enlightenment is nothing more than this. Enlightenment it's not being free of problems. It's not being free of bad feelings or fear or anger or resentment or shame or guilt. It's not being free of any of those. It is being completely connected to and living from your soul. Being enlightened means that you are conscious of all of your thoughts and feelings, positive and negative, and that you have them, that you have all thoughts and feelings because you're human. And when you have all of these thoughts and feelings, anger, sadness, rage, resentment, longing, love, regret, shame, guilt, when you have all these feelings and you have the consciousness to take constructive action for yourself and others, regardless of whatever feeling you may or may not have, that in itself is enlightenment, period. There is nothing beyond that. So people who are seeking to have this bliss of enlightenment, which really means I don't have any negative feelings and I'm just constantly high on, my feelings of happiness all the time, those are people who are running away from their feelings, and they are going to be the last that achieve enlightenment. This is why I cannot tolerate fake gurus. I can't tolerate it. Any teacher, I mean this, any teacher who either presents themselves as being enlightened or allows themselves to be characterized as being enlightened by other people is either a fraud, deluded, or both. Because no human, if you have a physical body, if you have 3 selves, if you have a lower self, if you have a reptilian brainstem, you are constantly creating negative feelings. There's constantly a good and bad going in you all the time. And that has to be because those, quote, negative feelings are what holds you into three-dimensional reality. It's also what saves your life. If you didn't have fear and selfishness and ego, then you would die. You'd walk in front of a car and go, what is that coming at me at lightning speed? Oh, look at that. That's a bear and he's charging at me. That's really interesting. Wow, look at the fur on that. You have to have fear. You have to have these negative feelings. You have to have anger. When you're driving on the road and somebody cuts you off and you end up screaming and yelling and flipping them off, which I don't recommend doing, by the way. People have done that to me and it's it's a bad idea. I've followed people home. When people have done that to me on a bad day, I'll follow them home. I don't do that anymore, especially now I'm in a foreign country. I don't do anything wrong here. The last thing I want is to get on anybody's radar. But point being is that when somebody cuts you off on the freeway, you get angry and you scream and you yell and you go, that motherfucker, yeah. And then after 5 or 10 seconds, you calm down, you realize you're okay, nobody's hurt, and then the anger subsides. It's a negative feeling that you have to have in order to survive. So if you want to be enlightened, stop trying to pretend you don't have any feelings. Otherwise, I'm going to come after you. All right, I forgot what the question was. Renee, question number 1, because she has multiple questions. What are your thoughts on combining Qigong and working with Loki? Well, my thoughts are the same. Loki is somebody I don't, it's like going to the Godfather, right? You knock on the Godfather's door and he says, what can I do for you? How can I help you, my friend? Well, it's going to cost you. You go to the Godfather and you say, yeah, somebody's trying to destroy my business and I want you to get rid of him. And he'll say, don't worry, I'll take care of it and I'll call on you. Well, what's going to happen is after he's taken out your competition, he's going to say, okay, so now we're partners. Now, not only are you going to sell this, but then you're going to also sell heroin through here, and I'm going to take this through, it's going to cost you. So if you go to Loki wanting to work with Loki, it's going to cost you something. So my thought is, why seek out the Godfather if you're okay? My take on Loki is this. My take on Loki is that if you really need help becoming aware, if something is really a problem for you, and you know that what you need is awareness, and you're not getting it through Odin or whomever you're working with, Shiva or whomever, then go to Loki and be as humble as you can possibly be, and talk to him from your pain. If you're honest and you're humble with him, he's not going to be stimulated like me. If you ask me an honest question, I'm going to want to help you. If you start coming in with your ego about whatever it is, even well-meaning, like the guy who came in here well-meaning, trying to be the expert on linguistics without having read my book or waited for me to get to that part of it, I'm going to come after you. I'm going to smell. Even in your questions, if you're not conscious, I'm going to smell the unconsciousness in your question, and I'm going to come after it like a shark. Loki's the same way. He's going to smell it. So just stay the hell away from him. Let him do his job, and just, try to live in such a way where don't try and get his attention. If you don't want Loki's attention, then be ruthlessly honest with yourself, be humble, and look to become conscious. And then Loki will see you from afar and give you a thumbs up and leave you alone. So otherwise, he's going to come. You don't have to. The other thing is, you don't have to worry about him coming to work with you. If you're out of awareness, he's going to come find you. And those are the problems. Like right now, for me, I've got now another channel that's starting to blow up. So I'm putting as much time into that channel as this. And that channel is what it's called, BPD, in case you want to look it up. BPD Relationship breakup, something like that. That's my other channel. That's because I got involved a while back. I was involved with a woman who turned out to have very severe borderline personality disorder, very serious mental illness. And it was horrific. And I got torn to shreds. And I remember being in it thinking to myself, how did I get into this? I mean, it was, trying to heal from that relationship was horrifically traumatic for me. And so what I did is I started a channel, first off, just because I didn't have anybody to talk to. I was making videos talking about, trying to figure out what the hell was going on and get my sanity back. I forgot about it. I did the work. I talked with my therapist and I, worked the 12 steps in Codependence Anonymous, and I healed from that, and I completely forgot about that relationship. But at the time, I didn't know if I was going to survive it. And that channel started taking off without me doing anything. I completely forgot about it. I came back, and now it's like it's going crazy, and it's like, oh, here's another way for me to be helpful and another way for me to be successful. And so it could turn into another income stream for me. So if I hadn't gone through that, I wouldn't have had that go on. Now, based on what people are telling me, I'm the only person that helps them, understand and how to overcome it. I'm the only person talking about it. Apparently I've got a very unique and helpful voice. That wouldn't have happened if Loki hadn't seen that in me and pulled me into that relationship. So that's the way that Loki benefits you. If you're willing to do the work, and be ruthlessly honest and evolve, then whatever pain you went through is going to turn into a huge blessing. So Loki's going to come find you, and he's going to poke and prod at the thing that needs to be dealt with the most. And if you heed that call, and if you're honest and you evolve, it will become a huge strength for you. 2. So combining Qigong and working with Loki. I mean, you don't have to. It's like saying combining Qigong and working with Odin, or combining Qigong and working with any other deity. It doesn't matter. Qigong should be something that you, Renee, should be doing anyway. Or whatever God you work with is whatever God you work with. Okay, hope I answered that. Number 2, any Vedic correspondences with Loki? Yes, I'm surprised you don't know what that is. It's Rahu. I talk about it all the time. Loki is Rahu. Rahu is Loki. Okay, what else? Nothing else. All right, so no more questions. Let's continue. How long have I been on? Does it say? I have been on for an hour. All right, so we'll talk about dwarves and then we'll call it a day. So let's go back here. All right, so the next chapter is called Dwarves. According to my teachings, the center of will in the navel area is the dwelling place of the dwarves within the microcosm. Dwarves are our essential physical, animal, human natures. This is the realm of the subconscious mind within us. This is the realm of our emotional reactions and patterns that drive our behavior and interpretations of our external world. Bear in mind, I'm using the word subconscious. There are 3 minds. You have the conscious, the unconscious, and the subconscious. So don't mix those 2 up. Drives me crazy. Most people who use the word subconscious mean unconscious, and they don't know the difference. The conscious mind is what's listening to me right now, saying, I'm hearing him, listening to him, I think this, I think that. The unconscious mind is what's driving you and the 90% of your mind that you're completely unaware of. That's why it's called unconscious. It means you're totally unaware of all of the stuff that happens. People who are miserable in their lives and keep, getting into, abusive relationships, and how come I didn't figure it out after the first abusive relationship? Why do I keep? Well, it's because you've got an unconscious mind. There's unconscious issues you're not aware of that are driving you to have that experience. That's why it's important to be ruthlessly honest and have a teacher for one thing, so somebody can reflect back to you what you're really thinking and doing, and a spiritual practice so that you can continue to become more conscious, meditative practice. The subconscious is in between. So the subconscious is the part of your mind where your birthday, your social security number, your mom's birthday, your anniversary, you're not thinking about it. In fact, you can go weeks or maybe even months without thinking about it, and somebody asks you and you just go into the subconscious and pull that file out. So you have access to the subconscious mind. You do not have access to the unconscious. Got me? All right. In Teutonic myth, dwarves are morally ambiguous, magical creatures formed out of the energetic substance of the cosmos. Dwarves can be very helpful or outrightly hostile to humans depending on their connection to higher forces. In other words, if the dwarves are in a good connection with higher forces, then they're helpful. If they're disconnected and they're not connected to higher forces, then they tend to be destructive. If dwarves are being directed by the gods, they help to create the physical cosmos with their magical powers. If they are left to themselves, they become narcissistic and highly destructive to humans. In the Volsunga saga, there are two brothers named Fafnir and Sigmund. Fafnir becomes so obsessed with his father's riches that he becomes a fearsome dragon that his human brother Sigmund must slay in order to retrieve his family inheritance. Although Fafnir and Sigmund are brothers, Fafnir is called a dwarf. According to the myth, there is no indication that Fafnir is in any way visually distinguishable from Sigmund. However, after becoming obsessed with riches, Fafnir the dwarf is transformed into a monstrous dragon. Among the riches being hoarded by Fafnir is the famed Helm of Awe. This is a Helm of Awe, which is used for invincibility in battle. One reason that I have incorporated this Eyjolfur Helm of Awe symbol as a major part of modern Teutonic animism is because it represents the power of the evolved divine mind who keeps the thirst-like powers of ignorance at bay, as well as underscoring our destiny as humans to evolve from our lower dwarf natures to that of divine minds, which is Man. And for this I say, see the chapter on Manaj Rune in Rune Shamanism. The myth of Fafnir and Sigmund underscores that our physical, animal, human nature employed by will, which is the lower self, when separated from our divine natures of Wod and Weoh, can become a tyrannical monster that steals our divine inheritance and hoards it underground in the cave of the subconscious, where it withers in the darkness unseen by the light of day and eventually sinks into the unconscious. So I didn't say that here, but when you push something down, you're aware of it, but you're choosing not to deal with it, and you push. After a while of continuously pushing something into your subconscious mind, it eventually will sink into your unconscious. Good example. I do this. I'm not proud of it, but there are, my birthday, one of the worst days of the year for me, especially like right now when I'm alone and I don't have a lot of people in my life. I try and forget that when my birthday comes, because that's the day where everybody loves you, and so I feel lonely, and I don't like feeling like that. My parents also, when I was a kid, would forget my birthday, and so it became so painful for me that when my birthday came up, that I would just choose to forget it, and then I would. My birthday would come and go, and I go, oh, holy crap, my birthday was yesterday. Same thing with Christmas. I don't do well with Christmas. Unless I'm surrounded by people and I'm in a relationship, something like that. Otherwise, I don't like it. It's no fun. And also, my fiance who passed away 2.5 or so years ago, our anniversary came and went. And I was completely clueless, totally forgot about it, except that if I look back on it, on the day of our anniversary, I got shingles. I got right over my left heart. I got shingles over my left heart. And I was wondering for weeks, how the hell I'm so healthy? How did I get shingles? And then it was like, oh yeah. I had, unconsciously, I had to mourn. I had to deal with it because it's still a very sad day for me. My fiance who passed away. But even though I consciously had no clue, my body had to deal with it. So I gave myself shingles. That's how the unconscious mind works. The subconscious mind, everything is there if you want it, but if you keep pushing it down, it's going to sink into your unconscious. All right, let's keep going. Do not mistake my characterization of dwarves to mean that they are not powerful, magical, spiritual creatures. They are so powerful that they have the ability to completely dominate our experience of material reality. In fact, dwarves create our entire external manifested reality. But in order for that manifested reality to serve us, we as the human hosts for the powers of dwarves need to make sure that they are aligned to the higher forces of the elves, or the ascended masters. Dwarves are similarly, what is that? I didn't edit this so good. Similarly to, thank you. Dwarves are similar to extremely powerful, very intelligent dogs. If a dog is well trained, it is the most faithful and obedient of servants. The more intelligent a dog is, the better servant it is. But conversely, the more intelligent the breed, the more troublesome they can become if the owner is not a strong pack leader. It is well known among dog breeders that if an intelligent breed of dog is not well trained, it can become extremely destructive. Intelligent dogs seek to find a strong pack leader. If the pack leader is not strong and able to command respect, that dog will seek to become the pack leader. Very often, prospective dog owners who are just looking for a sweet, docile pet will unwittingly purchase a breed of dog that wants a strong pack leader. The end result is that those dogs train the owner instead of the other way around. Similarly, if our dwarves in our subconscious are not given powerful guidance from the elves and our own soul, they will assume that they are the pack leader and they will begin to run our lives. In the Voluspa, we learn about the nature of dwarves and how they came to be. Quote, "The mighty Aesir drew to their judgment seats all holy gods to hold council. Who should fashion a host of dwarves from Brimer's blood and the limbs of the dead? There were fashioned many humanoid dwarves from the earth." Unquote. Dwarves were created by the Aesir to mold the matrix of energy in the cosmos into the physical manifested world we see with our eyes. We humans are meant to be Aesir on earth. However, if we abandon our connection to the ancestors, the Aesir, the Vanir, and the elves, the dwarves will lose respect for us as pack leaders and they will assume control of our external lives by creating our reality with whatever random, unresolved emotional and psychological baggage we carry around in our subconscious mind. In this translation, the word humanoid is used to describe the dwarves' nature. Notice they are not human, but humanoid. This refers to their nature as only resembling humans. But this is in regard to their nature as being comprised of that which makes the animal part of us human, namely our personality, our psyches, our survival instincts, and our emotions. Dwarves are devoid of a soul as we understand it. Humans have divine essences like the Aesir. In fact, we are Aesir incarnated on earth. But without integrating the powers of the elves into our being, we by definition only interact with the matrix of energy of the cosmos through our dwarf natures. Being that dwarves are magical creatures created directly out of the energy of the external cosmos, we humans are no match for them by ourselves. The myths are very clear that those who seek to interact or control the dwarves without proper authority or power can be instantly and mercilessly killed. It is well known by psychiatrists and psychologists that the power of choice in our lives is mostly an illusion. We are driven by our subconscious and unconscious emotional complexes. Unless we make the concerted effort to bring our subconscious and unconscious drives to our conscious awareness, we are doomed to forever be controlled and consumed by them. And I didn't put it in here, but there's probably because I hadn't read it yet, and I'm just trying to quote it. I'm paraphrasing, but Jung says, If you do not become conscious of what is unconscious, you will think it is God's will, and it will rule you. So in other words, people who have magical thinking about God brought this into my life, and I think God is telling me to do this, and then this happened and that happened, and so it's very clear that God is telling me, what he's saying is that you're God. In fact, I was thinking about this today. What is God's will for you? And God wants this for you, and God wants that for you. And people who run around worshiping God the Father, the Almighty, they don't realize they are worshiping their unconscious ego, which is why they're so, monotheists are so incredibly judgmental and controlling and insecure. It's because they're worshiping their own narcissism, their own unconscious narcissism. Yeah, all right, let's keep going. The only way for a human to have mastery over their dwarf nature is by integrating and balancing all three natures of Woden, will, and whale. If we do not actively seek to become Woden, master of awareness, we completely identify with our emotional complexes and mistake them for our entire identity. All right, so I'm going to share another story that I heard my teacher told us not too long ago. And I can't remember the exact name of it, but it's called the, so-and-so's suit. I forget the guy's name. Let's call him Zoltar. Zoltar's suit. All right, so this guy goes to get a suit made. So he goes to Zoltar, the master tailor, to get a suit made. So Zoltar says, okay, come back in a week and I'll have, takes measurements. Come back in a week and I'll have your suit for you. So he comes back to Zoltar, and Zoltar, puts on, I forget what it was. He puts on the jacket, and one of the arms is, the sleeves is way up here, and the other one's way down here. And he says, hey, man, this doesn't fit at all. And Zoltar says, how dare you? I am a master tailor. Everything I make is perfect. Here, let me adjust you. And so he crunches him down and then pulls him forward so that he's walking around. And he says, now walk. See, now it's perfect. Okay, and then he says, okay, but there's this bulge in the back. And he goes, that's because you need to arch your back forward. So arch your back and then go like this and walk like that and do like this and then walk around. And then, of course, everything fits perfectly. And he says, see, it's a perfect fit. So guy goes out wearing Zoltar's suit and he's walking around, like an infirmed old man, and somebody walks by and he goes, look at you, you got a suit made by Zoltar. And the guy says, how did you know I got a suit made by Zoltar? And he says, well, because only Zoltar would be able to create such a perfectly fitting suit for an old infirmed person like you. So lots of times when people get wrapped up, in this case, somebody was, we were in our group and somebody was getting wrapped up in their ego, their feeling of themselves. I'm no good, something like that. And he goes, Zoltar's suit. He goes, what's Zoltar's suit? So he told us the story. So in other words, it's your unconscious mind and your subconscious mind that has been programmed, by your childhood, past lives, whatever. Your responses to life, you tell yourself, I'm this, I'm that, my name is this, I do this, and you forget that you have this infinite nature within you. And so you create a suit. And you walk around like a hunchback when you could stand perfectly straight if you remembered who you were. So this is what the dwarf nature is. If the dwarf nature is not taking its commands from the higher self, from the soul, from your higher awareness, then you're going to create a suit for yourself and you're going to walk around. And I see this all the time, and of course you do too. There's no shortage of people that are, like I gave the example of somebody who keeps getting into abusive relationships. Why do I keep getting into abusive relationships? Well, because that's the suit you've made for yourself, and you walk around doing that. That's your unconscious mind, your subconscious mind. And if you can bring to your conscious awareness Oh my God, that's because when I was a little kid, my dad used to do this to me, and my mom said that to me. And so, in order to be loved and accepted, I started to accept this idea that I'm this worthless piece of crap, because that's how I learned to get along as a kid. And now I'm walking around as an adult trying to get by on life, and life isn't giving me what I want. Now that I'm conscious of that, I have to let go of my attachment. It's not, by the way, it's not just as easy to go, oh, that's how I was programmed. Now I'm not going to be that way. If you can do that, great. I'm not saying that that's impossible to do. For most of us, what ends up happening is we have to go, oh my God, my mom told me I was this, and in order to get my mom's love, I started accepting that role as being the whatever the hell I am. And, then the thought of not being that, the thought of being rich, of being prosperous, of being healthy, of having a healthy relationship, of being loved and appreciated. You think that you want that until you realize that the reason why you've been chasing after the other stuff is because you have a strong attachment to that, because that feels like love to you. So the sad part is, in order to move past it, you have to mourn. And this is what you're really avoiding. You're avoiding mourning, just like me. I completely forgot it was the anniversary of my fiance who has passed. It was our anniversary. I completely forgot about it because if I had become conscious of it, I would have had to mourn. And in fact, I remember it was weird because for a week I was crying. I'd come out surfing and I'd walk down the beach and I'd cry thinking about her. Well, of course, that was our anniversary week, so of course I'm going to be crying about it. So obviously I was unconsciously shoving it down so I didn't have to feel the pain. But when you become conscious of my mom did this to me, my dad did that to me, and I chose to allow it and bring it into my adult life because I want mommy and daddy's love, that knowledge isn't enough. Now you have to mourn how sad it is that a little kid who deserved to be taken care of and treated like a good person wasn't. It is sad that your mom didn't treat you well and love you right. It's sad that your dad smacked you around and called you names. It's sad that it's painful. You have to mourn. You have to go back and be that little kid and mourn and cry and say, why didn't you love me? I deserve to be loved. That way you self-parent, and then you go back to Zoltar and you give him the suit and you say, this suit doesn't fit. I'm going to get it from somebody else. And you go get another suit that actually fits who you are. And you go to a good tailor who says, no, stand up straight. No, you see, oh, look at that. See how broad your shoulders are? Look at that. Okay, there. We're going to get a suit so that you can, when you wear it, you'll stand proud and walk down and people will look at you and go, wow, look at that king. Or queen or whatever it is. Is now you guys clear what the subconscious, unconscious, conscious mind is? All right. So the only way, back to the text, so the only way for a human to have mastery over their dwarf nature is by integrating and balancing all three natures of Woden, Will, and Whale. If we do not actively seek to become Woden, master of awareness, we completely identify with our emotional complexes and mistake them for our entire identity. We can become no better than very smart dogs, with no master to guide them. They become destructive terrors, tearing up furniture and peeing on everything in a vain attempt to claim ownership of their surroundings, frantically seeking a sense of security. Having said that, once we have assumed the mantle of Woden in our lives, the dwarves are essential in our spiritual activities. The human soul resides in the middle center of our bodies in the realm of Whale, sacred space, our heart center. There's another reason why Middle Earth is called Middle Earth. It's because it's where humans dwell. It's corresponding also to the heart center. It is through the heart center that we observe and experience our lives. The heart center can also become disconnected from the dwarves, the Aesir, and the elves, making us impatient, insecure, judgmental, and fearful. The heart center in and of itself is also blind. It cannot by itself choose to connect with the elves without the power of the dwarves in the lower center. So, this is important to understand. We get higher awareness, it comes to our higher self. Our higher self gives that information to the lower self, our unconscious, our subconscious. The lower self translates it into human language and awareness, in other words, emotions, concepts, and then it gives it to the middle self, which then takes action based on that information. If your lower self is screwed up, if it's not aligned, then guess what? It's going to take that information, and you don't know how much of that information is accurate, how much of it is true, how much of it is based on your own selfish narcissism. It's going to give you a lot of information you think is coming from the gods, but it's not. It's coming from your own craziness. So that's why the lower self is so important. Why you need to be psychologically and emotionally mature and healthy. Because without it, you can't trust any information that comes to you. So when we seek to avoid or repress our unresolved emotional and psychological issues, we immediately become disconnected from our lower self, which is essential for being able to receive information and guidance from our higher self that is in constant contact with the ascended masters, or the elves. When this disconnection occurs on all three levels, then the human being becomes fragmented, resulting in disharmony. Disharmony causes all kinds of mental, emotional, spiritual, and finally physical diseases. The soul in the heart center becomes merely a helpless passenger in the body that is being run in circles by the unregulated dwarves in the lower center. This is where the power of meditation comes into play. Meditation is not necessarily anything unusual. It is merely this. When we relax and focus on our breath, the heart center is immediately connected to the lower center. The lower center is then immediately connected to the higher center of Wod. Wod then transmits informative guidance to the lower center. The lower center interprets that information and sends it to the middle center, where the soul evaluates that information and makes choices. Those choices are sent back down to the lower center as commands, where those choices are translated into physical reality. This is why you cannot accomplish anything without taking action. That's why I'm constantly telling you to take action. Because you can have all the awareness in the world. If you can't take action on it, it's meaningless. That's why people who smoke pot all day can talk about how I have a friend, he smokes a lot of pot, and he knows the kind of stuff that I do, and he says, you know what you should do? You should go do this, and you should go do that. You should have a program on the such and such channel. And I'm like, okay, how am I going to do that? I don't know. You should just talk to them and tell them who you are. It's like people who want to go become, as I'm thinking about it, there's nothing wrong with that. But, the fact that he doesn't understand, he's so caught up in his head, he doesn't understand, that there's a whole process behind that. It reminds me of people, when I was an actor and I had a theater company. So there'd be a lot of people showing up to Hollywood from, Boise, Idaho, or in the middle of, wherever, bumfuck, wherever, the middle of nowhere. And they'd show up thinking, I'm bright-eyed and bushy-tailed, I'm attractive, I'm going to become an actor. Where's the studios? Hi, studio, I'm an actor. Put me in a movie. It's like, no, there's work that's involved. You got to take action. So that's why it's important, because the lower center creates action. If you've got all these awarenesses and you can't take action, it means that there's something wrong in your lower self. Your lower self is in conflict, and it's not going to result in you taking action to accomplish what you want. Nor is it going to align the universe in such a way where opportunities come to you. If your lower self is clear and you have a connection to your higher self, then those two things happen simultaneously. You have the ability to take action directly on what you want without any interference, and also magically things seem to align so that you can easily take action because opportunities come to you. That is a result of having a clear lower self. Having the best ideas in the world and you can't manifest it, it means that there's conflict on an unconscious and a subconscious level. Nothing wrong with that. That's part of our job as humans, to become aware. So meditation this is why, emptiness meditation sits and watches your thoughts. I'm not a huge fan of that because it's very passive. But there's a place for it, which is you sit and you meditate and you listen to whatever thought, whatever feeling comes up. And you go, wow, that's not me, that's not me. So you get to see what's happening in your unconscious mind. And if you end up getting, peace of mind, which again, meditation does not mean emptying your mind. It drives me crazy. People say, I can't meditate, because they hear I'm a meditation teacher. And I say, what do you mean you can't meditate? Say, oh, I can't just empty my mind. And I said, who said you were supposed to do that? Well, isn't that what meditation is? You sit and you empty your mind? And I say, no. The empty mind is the result of the meditation, which might take years. Meditation is becoming conscious of what is unconscious. And there's literally hundreds of thousands of methods to do that. Mantra meditation, breath meditation, the Hul breath, visualization, Qigong, Tai Chi, swimming, walking in the forest. These are all methods of meditation which allow you to become conscious of your unconscious. But then you have to take action. All right, let's keep going. So the lower center interprets that information, sends it to the middle center where the soul evaluates that information and makes choices. Those choices are sent back down to the lower center as commands, where those choices are translated into physical reality. This is why at the end, when I teach you how to do a ritual, I teach you to say, so it is commanded, so it shall be done. You're sending a command to your lower self to go and manifest that. All of this takes place naturally when we relax, focus on our breath. It has been called meditation, but it is a natural, spiritual, human process for problem solving that has been honed by our ancestors after millions of years of evolution. The heart center acts as an administrator. It makes decisions and delegates information to the dwarves who go out and do the actual physical labor necessary. You can see why it is so vitally important to bring one's psychological and emotional issues into one's waking consciousness. If one has not kept their subconscious clear of unresolved issues, then when one goes into a meditative state, the first information that comes to them is their own unresolved emotional and psychological issues. When people first begin to meditate, they often complain of uncomfortable emotions of their minds racing. Well, of course, this process is merely giving one a status update on the current state within the lower self. This is where animist ritual comes into play. During formal ritual to the elves, Aesir and Vanir, the lines of communication between all three centers becomes clearer. Ritual is like an administrator asking for face time with upper management to resolve issues and problem solve. In an effective ritual, the dwarves become aware of the presence of the elves and are on their best behavior, thus allowing the better, clearer information to be directed to the soul in the heart center. In my first book, I outlined a basic elf ritual for guidance. In my opinion, if one has difficulty with meditation, or if one is aware that their lives are in some state of chaos, then I recommend regular elf rituals to clear away the static between the soul and the ascended masters. There is an evolutionary reason why our ancestors performed lots of rituals. Ritual to them was much more than just a result of primitive superstition or religion. Ritual is a survival mechanism that has evolved in humans in order to solve problems and interface with our surroundings as well as keep us mentally sane. To deny ourselves the power of ritual is to deny a very real, physical, psychological, and spiritual human need. I'm thinking of if you haven't watched it, I recommend it, watching the series called Rome. A lot of really good stuff. Whoever did the research on that, I commend them highly. One of the things I like about it is that, in the beginning of it, there's a Roman soldier and he's in prison. He's in jail for something, desertion or disobedience or something like that. And so he talks to the gods and he wants to be let out of prison. And so there's a cockroach running around. He grabs the cockroach and he's talking to whomever. And then he asks for what he wants and then he kills the cockroach right there. He offers a sacrifice. It was so understood that there had to be a sacrifice. Now that's a symbol. I'm not saying going around killing things, but it means that you have to give something of value, which is why our ancestors did things like killed livestock. Livestock was valuable. Killing a cow, for instance, as a ritual, that would be the same as burning $100,000. A cow was extremely valuable. So if you're going to ritually kill a cow and then cook the meat and give it to the whole village, you're basically taking $100,000 and just throwing it in the air. So it has to cost you something. So that is also just a symbol. It has to cost you. It means you're giving up something that you're attached to, that you have the illusion that has some value. You're going to give up smoking, for example. That would be a great ritual. You want the God's favor? Give up smoking. You're attached to it. It makes you feel good, but It's not helping you, but you have a really strong attachment to it. It's going to cost you. It's going to hurt. Go and work with somebody. The reason why I charge money for my time is for that very reason. Because I know if I just give you my time, even if I was independently wealthy, I would still charge people for my time. I don't know. I might take that money and give it to charity or something else. It's none of your business what I do with it. I would charge you money because I know from experience if it doesn't cost anything, people don't learn. And I've taught people for free and they didn't learn a thing. When I charge people money, they learn. The more I charge them, the more I'm guaranteed that they're going to practice it for the rest of their lives. So if I'm here to teach you, then I am going to make sure that it's going to cost you. Do you understand how that works? All right. When one combines the power of regular rituals with regular practice and meditation, then one moves toward becoming a wizard or a shaman. The difference between a wizard and the layperson is merely that a wizard has had more experience in this kind of ritual and meditation. Sometimes after many lifetimes of ritual and meditation, one may be born with a natural ability in meditation. This gift has been earned through many lifetimes of practice. This is why when a gifted shaman performs a ritual, all in attendance can feel the power of the deities and the ancestors in the room. This palpable feeling in the room is merely because the shaman has cleaned and polished his or her energetic connections between all three of his or her power centers, and the lines of communication between him and her and the higher power centers are clear. When she performs a ritual, the invitation to the deities and ancestors is clearly heard and they speedily arrive. It is just that simple. The more one seeks to create well-defined lines of communication, the more effective shaman and human being they become. Once again, this is not an exhaustive list of all the deities unique to Teutonic polytheism. It is possible that many of the lesser known and local Teutonic deities have become lost to the dusts of history. Perhaps they will return if we ask them to do so. All right, so I'm going to stop there. Now I'm on page 108. Look at that. Or is that 109? I'm on page 109 in my PDF version. All right, so that's a whole other thing. So we've been on for a while, so I won't continue. But I will take a look at any questions if there are any. Stormageddon, Dark Lord of All. Question. If our emotions create dwarves, are we creating new dwarves every day? Or is it only when we have extreme emotions? Yes, to both questions. Sorry. Yes. This is why there are things like ghosts. This is why there are things like demons. This is why there are things like poltergeists. Where do you think they came from? I think that the vast majority of hauntings are not souls of the departed. For instance, like ghosts. There's where I grew up, there was a lot of ghostly activity where I grew up, strangely enough. But there was a lighthouse. And there was this legend of, the woman in white. And I remember growing up hearing about the woman in white. A woman, if you were there, and people would go and they'd spend the night out there by this lighthouse, and they'd wait for the woman in white to come walking by and jump off the cliff. And it was some woman who, I can't remember exactly, something about, she's in white because she's in a wedding dress or something, and her husband cheated on her, or her husband abandoned her at the altar, or her fiance, something like that. And it was way back in the 1920s and all of that. So if you were there at the right time, you'd see this figure every night walk to the edge of the cliff and jump off. I never saw it, so I don't know. I only know the stories. Even today, I just read, I was on Facebook, and somebody from my hometown was talking about I think they're Coast Guard. There's a Coast Guard battalion there or something like that, and somebody else was talking about, people talk about all the time seeing the woman in white. So why is the ghost doing that? If this is a soul that is a disembodied soul, why is it doing the same thing? because it's not a human soul. It's the lower self of whoever that person was. Obviously, and what drives somebody to commit suicide? It's going to be their unconscious and their subconscious perceptions, their pain. She's obviously in a lot of pain. I mean, I can only imagine. It must have been horrific. Maybe it was back in the 20s, and back in the 20s, if you didn't get married, you were an old maid. Somebody cheats on you or something like that, or by the time you get to be 26 or 27 years old, you're an old maid and nobody wants you and you're tainted. And who knows, maybe she was pregnant. Who knows, maybe he slept with her and she wasn't a virgin anymore. I mean, it was just a big deal being a woman back then. If you didn't, it's not like now. Back then, if you didn't get married and have kids, you were worthless. That was your contribution to society. So maybe that was just too much for her. She just couldn't take it, and what was the point in living? A lot of emotional stuff going on in there. So when we die through violent or sudden or tragic, or if somebody dies with major unresolved issues, then all of that identity of who they are in their lower self, which is not their soul. My name is Michael Denney, and I grew up in Palos Verdes, California, and I was a surfer, and all the surfers where I grew up used to, beat me up and take my lunch, and I was the shortest kid in school, and I have to prove myself to the world and lift weights, and that's me. That's my lower self. It's my identity. If I don't work through that and go work beyond that and get to myself as a human, then when I die, if I die through sudden means, then all that gets squished out onto the material plane, and it walks around and it keeps trying to do whatever the hell it was trying to do. She was trying to kill herself. So guess what? It doesn't work. So her lower self every night thinks it's, June 26th, 1925, and still, doesn't know. That's why when you see people who do these ghosts hauntings or whatever, and they try to communicate with the ghost, and you try and tell the ghost, hey, it's okay, go to the light, the ghost will get mad and start throwing things. No, it's not 1927 now, it's 2020, and they start throwing things and getting upset because that's where they're stuck. They're stuck in that time frame, which, by the way, this is why people, even after your parents die, people still treat themselves like crap, and why does that woman still keep getting into the abusive relationship? Because in her unconscious mind, she hasn't aged, because there's no such thing as time. You're still a 4-year-old. Your unconscious is a 4-year-old. This is why we call it regression. When people, when they go back and they have emotional, flip outs or whatever, psychologists say you regressed. Means you went back and you're operating from your unconscious perspective of yourself, which is stuck. Whatever trauma happened to you at whatever time in your life, you're stuck in that time period unless you heal. So these are ghosts. Ghosts aren't the souls of people. They're the dwarves squished out onto the human plane. According to Taoists, and I believe also Siberian shamans, that when you die, your lower self becomes a nature spirit. So this is, if you die and you've lived through your life and you're conscious, then your lower self becomes a nature spirit. And after a while, it forgets who it thought it was, and it's just a nature spirit. And then eventually it'll be incarnated in a human and all that. So this is why you have a responsibility, not only to yourself, but perhaps to your future incarnation if you end up with the same lower self. What if your lower self ends up with somebody else? Because the lower self will attach itself to a human as it's created. If you don't clean your lower self up, there's a possibility you're handing all of your psychological garbage to somebody else. You might even be living out the psychological garbage of somebody else. You owe it. Your lower self deserves you to be the king and live according to the soul so that you can work through all that stuff. And then that lower self can evolve and eventually become a soul. You're responsible. It's not enough to just, be selfish and not work through your pain. Those of you who are working through a lot of really, really painful stuff in your life, you don't have the the luxury of just not dealing with it. You have to deal with it, not only for your sake, but for everybody else's sake. You have no idea how much damage you might be causing somebody by not dealing with your stuff. This is why it's so important to have a teacher. If you need to go to therapy, this is why it's so important to have a spiritual practice. This is what it's all about. All right, let's see if there's any questions here. All right, that's not a question. Stormageddon, Dark Lord of All. Question: what is the difference between someone who is operating from a destructive dwarf nature and someone who is operating from the thirst giant nature? Well, who told you that there's such a thing as a thirst giant nature? Did I say that? So there's an assumption in there. I didn't ever say that human beings have this nature. We have a dwarf nature. We have an elf nature, and we have a human nature. We have an Aesir. So we have dwarves, elves, and Aesir. I'm not saying that it's impossible to have a thirst nature, but I didn't tell you that that's how things worked. So, you don't have to, everything is our projection, but again, I think that's, too simplistically assuming that you have a thirst nature, this nature, or that nature. Anyway, I don't remember ever teaching that. Okay, so that's it. I don't see any more questions. So the short answer to your question is I don't know, because I never thought about it. My personal response is I don't think we have a giant nature. I don't think that's part of our makeup. All right, there you go. No more questions? All right, I'm going to call it a day then. Let's do some business first. Lockdown.thunderwizard.com. I have lowered the price. And so the lockdown is going into a shift. It's not, it doesn't look like there's going to be a clean end to it. Last I heard, and you guys can correct me, it looks like at least in California there's no end to the lockdown. It looks like it's going to go on indefinitely. God, how horrible. So I've lowered the price, which means that I'm no longer, if you purchase the lockdown package, you're not going to have any one-on-one time with me because I don't have as much time as I did. I need to use that time with my clients and, to have my own life. But you'll still end up getting 2,000, you're getting, I don't know how much, but you're going to end up saving like $2,000. So go and watch the video I have on that page. You'll know what I'm talking about. Thunderwizard.com. If you want to show me love, if you want to keep me on the channel, making videos and talking, then go to thunderwizard.com and subscribe at whatever level you want. That will give you access to videos where I get into very specific teachings and techniques, which I do not teach on this. And it keeps me afloat and helps me to be available to teach and continue to do this. And also you can, whatever level, if you do it at the $25 level, you'll learn the mastery of shamanism. And trust me, it'll take you months and months and months to get through all of those videos and practice them. And then there's the Manifestation Mastery course, and I teach you exactly what you need to do to create your life. And then, of course, courses.thunderwizard.com have things that, like books and DVDs and things like that. Now, the last thing is this. If you want to achieve enlightenment, I have one very simple, very easy method. If you do this one thing, I guarantee enlightenment. Subscribe and hit the bell button. If you do that, you will magically become an immortal, and you will leave your body and you will be one with the heavens. Or if that doesn't happen, then at least you'll be notified whenever I upload or go live. So either way, kind of the same. Enlightenment, knowing when I'm going to put up a video, it's kind of the same thing. Same value. All right, that's it. No more questions, so I'm done. I will see you guys later. Thanks for taking time out on your Saturday evening. It's Sunday for me. And I will see you guys all very soon. And tomorrow, after my clients, I'm going to go do this. That's me about 5 years ago. See the resemblance? All right, then. That's it. Talk to you guys later.